Coming up on this edition of Pinpoint Weather University, we're talking wildfires. Wildfire season on the rise across the Carolinas. We'll talk about the main culprit for an increase in wildfire danger. Plus, winters are getting warmer. That's new research data from Climate Central, a nonprofit group saying winter not only the fastest growing season in the U.S., we're also seeing some big time impacts from that warming during the winter season. We'll show you the latest numbers here in the Charlotte area, how much warming we're actually seeing.
Pinpoint Weather University, sponsored by Gaston Roofing.
Welcome into Pinpoint Weather University. I am meteorologist Brandon Lawson here on Queen City News Plus. I want to welcome in our YouTube viewers as well. Man, we've got a pretty good episode coming up here for Pinpoint Weather University. A lot of topics. You know, around this time of year, you would think the weather would kind of slow down a little bit, especially in the Carolinas. It tends to be our driest part of the year. Don't really see a lot of activity. Sometimes you can get some severe weather during this time of year because we get more cold fronts coming through, but things are pretty active. We're seeing wildfire danger on the increase. Part of that dryness that's causing that, but we're also seeing a lot of leaves on the ground. So let's talk about some of the main notes that do lead to a higher wildfire risk around this time of year and why we're seeing that increase. So we got very dry air and also leaf debris. So leaf debris essentially is just all the leaves that are falling off the trees. And essentially, once that leaf debris falls off the trees and onto the ground, it just acts as fuel for wildfires. It's just dead vegetation. It's just adding to that dead vegetation that's already down there on the grass or on the ground, wherever that might be. And the problem is when you get all those leaves piled up, let's say you set all those leaves on fire, it's just going to spread to other portions of leaf debris and other portions of dry vegetation, and that is going to increase your fire danger. And that's why we're really seeing our fire danger increase across the Carolinas, particularly this week, the week of the November 15th, but also other weeks as well. I think as we go through the month of November and early December, we'll still see wildfire season picking up. Plus, more windy days. We get a lot more wind around this time of year. More frontal boundary passages lead to more wind. And that also helps spread your fire. Abnormally warm conditions also going to be helping with fire danger. So let's talk about how the wildfire begins. I want to take this on full screen for you. Again, you've got your dry vegetation, and then eventually you get your leaf debris on the ground as well. I didn't put leaves in this graphic in particular, but I did show you your dry vegetation. So here's your fire. That can start with any spark. I mean, we're talking about a lot of folks that like to burn brush, which is okay. You just want to limit it during this time of year because, again, wildfires can spread pretty quickly. But something else we see around this time of year is cigarette butts getting thrown out into the grass. That can start fires. You can start a fire with just a spark on your car. Like, let's say you're parking in the grass and the grass gets really warm and heated up and it sets on fire. That's other ways you can start fires. So it's not just really people that like to burn brush that cause these fires. It can be cigarette butts and different things like that. A lot of the fires that happen in the Carolinas and really across the U.S. are actually, unfortunately, arson. They're set on purpose, or there's somebody that was not paying attention to their fire correctly. So yeah, you get your spark and then you get the strong winds that spread the fire to other dry portions of vegetation or other dead leaf debris that's also on the ground. Again, that really piles up around this time of year. So there's a lot of things that go into wildfires, and something about these wildfires is that they can spread very, very quickly. Now, when they spread, it can be a little bit tricky for firefighters to put them out. They use a lot of different tactics to do that. And not only do they use a lot of different tactics, they use a lot of different language like containment. The fire is 60% contained, 90% contained. This is how many acres it's burned. We've got a fire ring around the fire. We're evacuating this portion of the area from this fire. So I spoke with the North Carolina Forest Service a few weeks ago here on the show at Pinpoint Weather University. And during that conversation with them, we spoke about that containment, what that means. We spoke about some of the methods they use to put the fires out. So I want to play that clip for you. It's about 4 or 5 minutes long, but it just can really explain what all that means during wildfire season when it comes to containment and also how they're putting these fires out. Take a listen.
So when we say containment, we are referring to the area of the fire that no longer possesses a threat or reburn, reignition potential. Essentially, it's cold and dead, and we can move on to something else. So if you hear that a fire is 65% contained, Well, that means 65% of it is what we would consider out. The other 35% is still active because there must be a heat source still present. So just to kind of explain containment for you, that's if you hear 10% contained, 50% contained, 75% contained, that is the area of the fire that we are comfortable that it no longer possesses reburn potential. But then getting into just suppression tactics and strategies that we use, we talked about heavy equipment here on display here at the State Fair. So we utilize bulldozers to help cut fire lines into places and get down to bare mineral soil to create a fuel break. So we utilize heavy equipment. We also have we utilize, especially in the mountains, hand crews. Just the topography alone in the mountains may present some challenges when it comes to heavy equipment because you're looking at rocky cliffs and steep slopes and things of that sort. So those alone may not be conducive for heavy equipment. So we may utilize more hand crews, folks just hiking through the woods, roughing it, and then in constructing that hand line using hand tools. Depending on where the fire is, how it's burning, what structures or homes are in its path and threatened, we may use a strategic firing operation, which is basically a backburn. You may have heard burnout, backburn operation, where we'll actually use fire to fight fire. We can get in some of these areas where if we know a fire is going to advance in a certain area or there's a threat in a certain area that we need to eliminate, then we may go ahead and actually burn it up in a controlled, easily managed intensity level. We'll go ahead and consume those fuels before the wildfire itself gets there. That way it has nothing left to burn. And then
I found that very. I was gonna say I found that very interesting last year. I actually kind of learned that myself. Like we were hearing like, oh, they're setting more fires to try and put the fire out. So I've found that very interesting. Learned that last year in the Western Carolinas. That was a big tactic that you guys used.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they'll see, and when we do that, we count that acreage towards the size of the fire. So if the fire itself is 75 acres and we've had to burn 25 acres to help gain containment, then the fire is going to show 100 acres. So it may have been 75 acres of the actual wildfire. We burn the other 25, and that's how we get to 100 acres. But then going back to resources that we have at our disposal, we also operate a aviation fleet of about 23 available aircraft, helicopters, planes. We also have a couple of single engine air tankers that we use. And so aviation typically doesn't put the fire out, but we use it to target some of those hotter areas. The areas where the fire is burning more intense, it's advancing quicker. And by dropping suppression on those areas, kind of pre-treating it is what we'll call it, wetting it down, we can slow the progress of that fire until we can get some better resources in those areas. And so aviation doesn't put the fire out typically just because the fires burn so intense. And in a lot of cases, we have ground fire where it's actually burning beneath the surface. But we can pre-treat areas and we can at least slow it down, those quickly advancing walls.
I really enjoyed that conversation. That was Philip Jackson, the public information officer with the North Carolina Forest Service. He actually spoke to me the week of the North Carolina State Fair there in Raleigh. They set up a lot of like cool technology that they use to put out fires. They have Smokey the Bear out there, one of my favorite people. I love Smokey the Bear. He was out there as well at the State Fair there in Raleigh in North Carolina. So they were just setting up for that, and he spent a little bit of time talking to me before he had to go back out and help set up. So big shout out to Philip Jackson. There's a lot of good information there, just talking about containment, what it means, and also talking about how they put fires out. I always thought it was very interesting that especially last year, really earlier this year at the spring wildfires in Western North Carolina, I thought it was wild that they were setting fires. When I heard they were setting fires, I was like, man, what? You guys are setting fires to put out fires? So I thought it was really cool how they explained back burning and how you explain back burning and how that process works as well. So coming up, we're going to go from hot to cold. We're going to be talking about the winter season. Yeah, we got a little bit of taste of snow here in the Carolinas. Really last week, we got into November and we started off hot, and then we got cold and a little quick burst of snow, kind of a historic snow for us here in the Charlotte area with how early it was. But that doesn't mean we're going to see a lot of winter snow when we get into the actual winter season itself. Winters are getting warmer, not only here in the Carolinas, but across the entire U.S. We're going to be talking about just how much warmer the season is getting here in Charlotte. We'll talk about some of the big impacts that come with the warming winter. We'll be right back here on Pinpoint Weather University on Queen City News Plus. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University here on Queen City News Plus. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. You're looking at some of the snow that we saw during the week of November 9th up north. The Great Lakes getting blasted with snow. The Great Lakes region getting their first lake effect snow of the season. And then even here in the Carolinas, this is a look at video from Asheville. Man, how about that? The snow dumping there November 9th and 10th. And again, this is actually not just snow that we saw in the mountains and also up in the Great Lakes region. We saw snow here in Charlotte as well. We saw snow flurries, the sixth earliest snow on record in Charlotte history. We tied for the sixth earliest snow there on November 10th. So it was not a winter wonderland per se, but it felt like it because here in Charlotte, we don't get snow a lot. There's no secret about it. We throw fits about it. We get upset about it, but especially here recently, we have not seen a lot of snow. Matter of fact, we are just ending a snowfall drought here in the Carolinas. Take a look at this chart. This was one that I made last year. Consecutive days without snow. When you look at the record books here, look at the top. January 30th, 2022 to January 9th, 2025. We went 1,076 days without measurable snowfall. That is unreal. Almost 3 years in Charlotte without measurable snow. That is just unbelievable. And look at the second longest stretch of non-measurable snow days, 778 days. That was back in the 1990s, 1991 to 1993. So, yes, not only did we break the record for the longest streak of days without measurable snow, we shattered it. And it was kind of getting upsetting here in the Carolinas, not getting snow. It was getting very frustrating. But it is something that we are seeing more common here in the Charlotte area, at least a lot less snowfall. One big reason for that is our warming. I want to show you some data from Climate Central here. I'm popping this up for you. Climate Central does research data every single season for whatever season it is, fall, winter, whether it's spring, summer. They always put out charts to reflect the current year. So this is looking from 1970 to 2025. This is looking at the average temperature during the winter season. The average temperature for Charlotte during the winter season has went up almost 4.5 degrees. That is an extreme warm up here in the Charlotte area. Also the fastest warming season for Charlotte. So this is very scary. I always talk about how 1 degree is too much. When your body warms up 1 degree, it gets sick. When our earth warms up 1 degree, it gets sick. But 4 degrees of warm up is not good. It's just not good. And I want to also point out as well, this is another chart they have put out as well for us. They are Climate Central, our friends there. 1970 to 2025. This is looking at more warm winter days. So essentially is looking at days above normal. We are seeing on average 15 more days during the winter season, or we're experiencing 15 more above normal days for temperature, meaning we're experiencing 15 more warmer than normal days here in Charlotte over the last 50 years. When we look at really 55 years, when we look at that data. So that is also wild. But I want to show you a graphic that might shock you even more. This is looking at the entire U.S. and looking at the average temperature warm up that we're seeing over the entire U.S. here. So notice most of the darker reds are coming from the eastern U.S. So the eastern U.S. is seeing the most winter warming. But even out west, there's still a lot of lighter to moderate reds out there, indicating at least a half a degree or a degree or two of warming for our average temperature during the winter season. And then as you get further east towards the Great Lakes region and towards the Carolinas, the Southeast, the Mid-Atlantic there, the Deep South, we're talking about areas, especially in the Great Lakes, that are seeing 5 to 6 degrees of warmer temperatures during the winter season over the last 55 years. The temperatures have warmed up about 5 to 6 degrees for winter seasons in the Great Lakes, and about 4 or so degrees here in the Carolinas, and even down towards the deep south and the southeast, we're seeing 3 to 4 degrees of warm up. And then even out west, 1 to 2 degree warm up, but that is still a lot. Winter, definitely the fastest warming season when it comes down to climate change. Now, I want to point out, a lot of folks will hear that and they'll say, the winter season's warming, but we still see snow. We still see cold days. We still see wind advisories issued. We still see cold weather warnings issued. This doesn't mean anything. And I want to point this out. I made this graphic for you to kind of help align things for you. So in a warmer world, we will have freezing nights, but we will have fewer of them. In a warmer world, we will have cold streaks, meaning we'll have days, multiple days in a row where it's cold, but the streaks of colder days will be shorter. We will have extremely cold days, but those extremely cold days are not as cold. So just wanted to kind of phrase those out for you. Like another thing too, we are going to have winter storms, but they're not going to be as significant winter storms as we're used to seeing. So you're still going to see the white stuff. You're still going to see the snow on the grass, and the vegetation will still likely die for the most part because it gets so cold on some nights. But we are seeing other impacts from the winter season being warmer. It's not just about snow, right? It's not just about the snow coming down to the ground or colder temperatures. There's other aspects of it too that you have to think about. Pest, disease carrying pests like mosquitoes. I've been seeing them in Charlotte through December and January. That is scary because mosquitoes, they can carry disease. And obviously, during this time of year, we want mosquitoes to die off. You don't want them to be an issue. I took my dog to the vet about a year ago, and they were like, I take him to the vet all the time. But about a year ago, I took my dog to the vet, and I heard a statement from a veterinarian. They were like, make sure you get this shot for ticks and mosquitoes. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, you know what? That is right. He does need that shot. They're kind of hang on. He was like, and the veterinarian was like, yeah, pests don't die here in the Carolinas. And unfortunately, that is becoming a big truth here in the Carolinas. But there's also other impacts that you have to think about. Pests is one thing, but you got to think about the snowpack, the decrease in snowpack that we're seeing because of more warmer temperatures during the winter season. So winter is warming fast. Matter of fact, about 98% of the study done by Climate Central, 98% of U.S. cities analyzed are warming, which is significant. So when you look at some of the impacts for this, warmer winters reduce the mountain snowpack, which is a critical source for spring melt water that refills reservoirs. And really helps crops and different things like that. It helps meet the peak water demand across the western U.S. during the summer season. So that's something we see an impact from. Also seeing the cold winters lead to more pests. Warmer, shorter winters impact the growing season. We have allergies linger when the growing season is trying to end during the fall, and we have later freezes. Unfortunately, that keeps allergies around longer, and that's something else we don't want to be doing. We don't want to be sniffing from allergies as we head into the fall season because we still have stuff growing. And then another thing too, and this is going to be a separate episode, hopefully down the line, but I want to do an episode with you guys talking about how warmer winters are impacting the Olympics. There are cities that have been doing the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, for decades, and unfortunately, some of those cities eventually are going to run into some issues when it comes down to sports and Winter Olympics and different things like that, because you get that economic impact here with the rising temperatures because you don't have enough snow and ice accumulation to put on these Winter Olympics. 19 cities to host the Winter Olympics since 1950 have warmed by over 4.5 degrees, almost 5 degrees since 1950, and that's on average. Beijing has actually warmed by, get this, nearly 9 degrees from 1950. 9 degrees of warming for the Winter Olympics is definitely not good. That's Fahrenheit, by the way. So that's something we'll do an episode on. The Winter Olympics actually coming up this year, coming up this season. So we'll be talking about how that could be impacted in the future, coming up in some future episodes of Pinpoint Weather University. But did just want to show you some of that latest data from the Climate Central nonprofit group there, and just kind of explain that. Now I want to show you kind of the winter outlook for this year. Again, I showed you some of those quotes about how we're still going to have cooler days, but I want to show you kind of what the winter outlook looks like across the U.S. So the Climate Prediction Center is predicting warmer than normal temperatures across the Southeast, the Four Corners region, and also cooler temperatures across the Dakotas and up into Seattle in the Northwest Pacific. This aligns with La Nina. A weak La Nina, you get the jet stream further north, and that leads to cooler temperatures further north and warmer temperatures further south. And also, since the jet stream's further north, that's going to be the active track. So looking at the precipitation outlook, we're looking at wetter than normal conditions for the Great Lakes region and also the Dakotas and Northwest Pacific. And then where the jet stream is not, it's not further south, so you're not going to get a very active low pressure track there. So we tend to see drier than normal conditions across the Mid-Atlantic, Southeast, and the Four Corners region. So that's kind of the outlook we're looking at for this winter season from the Climate Prediction Center. So does this mean it's not going to snow at all here in the Carolinas? No. We can still see snow as we just did. But again, I do want to point out that little snow that we saw November 10th, that's not a precursor of what's going to happen this winter. Now, after strong El Nino seasons into La Nina, we can tend to get a little bit of snow. It just depends on the low track, all about where low pressure centers track from the Gulf up along the East Coast, and just how far east or how west those lows track can really impact our winter forecast. We saw some of those last year where we had the low pressure center too far east and it created more rain or more of a mix of rain and ice versus snow. We kind of saw that last year, or really earlier this year in January when we saw the snow drought in. We saw about an inch or so of snow, and then we just got a bunch of ice. And unfortunately, that has to do with the low pressure center not tracking where we need it to track in order for that snow to fall. So this is something we'll be talking about a lot as we get into the winter season. It's something we'll definitely be discussing with you when it comes down to maybe how much snow we might see this winter, how cold it could get. We can still see cold days, but when you look at the winter season as a whole, after December, January, and February, we will likely see warmer than normal temperatures and we'll likely see drier than normal conditions. But hopefully we can get one big winter storm in here, maybe spice up snow a little bit for us, but I just wouldn't count on it this year. But coming up in this edition of Pinpoint Weather University, we've got one more thing to talk about: Thanksgiving. How about it, right? We're getting ready to gather around with our families, maybe doing some traveling. We'll talk about what some of the latest trends look like for the Thanksgiving weather outlook right after this. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University. You're seeing it there, the family gathering around. Yeah, we're going to be doing that next week. That guy's clapping, seeing that turkey land. We are getting ready for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving lands on Thursday, November 27th this year. Friday, November 28th, we've got Black Friday. And obviously, it's a good time of year to be with the family, but it's also a good time of year to get all the good eats. And I'm thinking about the mac and cheese. Mac and cheese is my favorite food and my favorite Thanksgiving meal as well. I'm making it this year for my family. I made it last year as well. There's a lot of pressure. The mac and cheese is very important. Now, I will say, looking at this video that we have for you here, I'm not seeing any mac and cheese. I'm going to have to yell at Kevin Pinto, who was editing the video in here for me. And I'll be like, man, you got to get some mac and cheese in there for me next time. But the reason I've got Thanksgiving in the Pinpoint Weather University episodes, because I did want to talk about the Thanksgiving weather forecast. So looking at just the temperature outlook, kind of similar to what we looked at with the winter outlook, just from the Climate Prediction Center, looking from November 26th to December 2nd, we are looking at warmer than normal temperatures across the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic. I do think it's going to be a warm Thanksgiving this year, and I also think it's going to be a pretty wet Thanksgiving this year across the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic. And then when you look further north, if you're heading towards the Dakotas, the Northwest Pacific, the Rockies, it does look cooler than normal there. Fingers crossed, maybe a little bit of snow if you like to ski in the Rockies around this time of year and for Thanksgiving. And then when you look at the precipitation outlook, It looks wetter than normal from November 26th to December 2nd. So that doesn't just include Thanksgiving. It could include Black Friday as well. But some model data, long range, is maybe forecasting some thunderstorms for the Mid-Atlantic. So that could include us here in the Carolinas. But just want to give you an early outlook at that. I know Thanksgiving's coming up. A lot of travel plans are being planned out. I just wanted to give you an idea of what that could look like. We'll have more on that on Queen City News as we go, not only through this weekend, but next week as well, leading into the Thanksgiving holiday. As always, I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Pinpoint Weather University. Take care of yourself and each other as we continue to navigate the earth together, my friends. Take care.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.